Child's Play spoiler review, a lot to talk about. Let's do this. What's up, guys? I just finished doing my non-spoiler review, so now we're going to talk about spoilers, all the spoilers from Child's Play, this remake. And I gotta say, when I was recording that review, I was like, normally my reviews are like 10 minutes, and I think I talked, by the time I was done, I looked at my little Zoom H1. If you ever want to get crystal clear audio, get you a Zoom H1. But I looked at this, and it was like at 18 minutes. It's got this little counter on here. And I was like, wow, I just talked for 18 minutes of non-spoiler stuff for this Child's Play review. There was just so much to discuss in the movie. And I remember going to see this movie, I went with my wife and my son. And my wife didn't want to go see this movie at all, actually. She just wasn't interested. She saw the trailer. She says, that looks freaking horrible. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go see it anyway. She doesn't like Chucky as much as I, the big horror fan likes Chucky. And he's still not even like my favorite horror guy. I'm a Myers guy. But after we went and saw this, when we walked out, she said, I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. And I think my wife represents those people that really just don't give a shit about this franchise, and what Brad Dourif, the brilliant Brad Dourif, brought to the role. And, I have to give Brad Dourif props because I never wanted anybody to play Chucky after Brad Dourif. He played him so perfectly. And I would still welcome Brad Dourif coming back, because I think they're still doing like a Child's Play TV series or something like that. But after watching this movie, I'm definitely on board for Mark Hamill coming back and doing it, just because of how different he chose to play this role over Brad Dourif. And who wouldn't want to go a different route than Brad Dourif? Because he chose to really focus on who Chucky was as a character in this movie. He was artificial intelligence. He wasn't this demon-possessed doll like in the original franchise. And so, playing around with that, using that robotic nature and, the vulnerabilities of that technology, because everything is, like I said in the non-spoiler review, everything is so literal and so confusing to this AI. And to play around with that and make it this danger because of context and not understanding, what it is perceiving. And I realized that along the way in this movie. I was like, oh, I see what they're doing with this. And I think this is kind of brilliant, actually. To be able to separate yourself from that original franchise and look at this as just its own property, a killer doll movie. You can have a lot of fun with it, actually. And there's a lot of possibilities for the future with this property. And it's kind of cool, too. This is the first property to have a remake go kind of a different way in terms of who the core character is. And you could have another whole franchise, Chucky franchise, to choose from. You don't like the evil possessed doll version? You can check out the AI, which is not really evil. It's just a learned technology. And you have to decide if it's going to go bad or if it's going to go good. So really, the villain of this movie is not Chucky. It's actually Andy. But Andy doesn't know that he's the villain. He doesn't know what he's doing, what he's setting Chucky up to be. So going back to the spoiler stuff, in the beginning, how does this version of Chucky become the way he became? Well, it's a disgruntled employee. Disgruntled employees are dangerous people. And so this disgruntled employee ends up getting one back on his boss, and he takes the doll and he removes all the safety features, the big safety net over the doll, kind of like what they did in Spider-Man Homecoming, I guess. He removes everything so that way the doll can just react and learn to everything around it, and it creates for some crazy stuff to potentially go on. And so jumping forward, we first meet Karen and Andy, this family. And Karen is dating this asshole. And I thought it was interesting throughout the first half of the movie, you think they're just, it's a healthy relationship. You got this guy that's stepping in, and of course Andy's not going to like him because he's not his real father. And so they were playing with some pretty natural stuff going on. But then in the middle of the movie, they drop this big bomb that the guy's actually married with kids. And so right away you're like, oh, that guy's a freaking dick. I hate this guy. And so it sets up a kill that you want to happen because, the guy is just a scumbag. And that first kill I thought was so brilliant in this movie because, like I said in the non-spoiler review, it stretched it out. It utilized that kill in every way possible, really threading it into the story. And the kill was gruesome as hell too, because Chucky ends up beheading the guy and taking his skin off. You see, there was this scene earlier where they were watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, which I freaking love that movie. I love that they utilized an aspect of that movie, Leatherface, and they tied it into this Chucky movie. But then throughout the rest of the movie, that head is kind of moving around, moving from place to place. It starts out at Andy's place and then him and his friends, which I loved his friends, by the way, but they're trying to get rid of this head. And so it just kind of travels from place to place. And it ends up at this detective's house as a present to his mother, which was hilarious. And I just ate that up. I love that they took that kill and just kept, passing the ball around. What else can we do with this kill? What else? I thought the kills were brilliant in this movie. And since I'm talking about the kills, then later in the movie when they're in the toy store, you got this like mascot dude coming out with this big giant head, and Chucky comes up and just stabs him right in the neck. And then right after he stabs him, the guy comes out and he's like faced with this crowd of people. And then he just starts toppling over. I remember I was just like gut laughing through that whole scene. And then the thing pops out, blood squirts all over the kids. So just so much great carnage candy in this movie too. Did not hold back. I mean, some of the kills were pretty damn squeamish actually. And I'll talk more about a couple of those kills as I get into some of the other characters. Now, one of the characters that I didn't talk about really in my non-spoiler review is what I like to call Discount Jack Black. And I hate to call an actor that, but god damn, he looks just like Jack Black. There was times where I literally thought that it was Jack Black in the marketing of this movie. But this guy was a key player in the movie too, because at one point, Andy has had it up to here with Chucky, and he wants to throw away the doll. He wants to get rid of it. And he ends up taking the core, like the CPU, out of the doll. So it ends up in this groundskeeper's possession. And so Frankenstein style, he revives Chucky. And so Chucky is pissed off when he's revived. And then really creates havoc at the end of the movie. But this guy's death was really interesting too, because they have this like table saw, and Chucky like strings him up, he's hanging by his neck. And then all of a sudden, you're just like waiting and waiting and waiting for this guy to fall on this table saw. And it was pretty damn bloody, actually. Now, I thought Aubrey Plaza was so great in this movie. She really cared about Andy. She loved him to death. And she was just a single mother, trying to make ends meet, doing the best she could. And I thought she was a great representation of a lot of mothers today, actually. But throughout the movie, she's doing whatever she can to help Andy. And Chucky kind of is like 2 steps ahead of everybody throughout this thing, just because of what he's learned. So I loved in the last act when, just visually, it was a really striking scene where she's like strung up by the neck, and Chucky, this is like a really violent scene actually, and she's doing everything she can to save her son. And I like that, that bond between her and Andy. I thought the bond between her and Andy was so strong in this movie actually, and I thought it was one of the core components of the movie. Now, one of the aspects that I didn't really touch on in my non-spoiler was really the pacing of this movie and how it was pretty patient, actually. It really took its time to build the story, build that relationship between Andy and his mother, Andy and Chucky, and how Chucky was like turning into this really creepy doll throughout the movie. I like how they tried to let the audience know, especially the fans of the original, that this is not the same Chucky. This is going to be a very different Chucky. And there were so many scenes where, it was scary. It was pretty damn creepy, actually. If I remember correctly, there are very few like one-liners or, there's a couple here and there, but for the most part, they chose to focus on that creepy aspect, all the way down to like the facial expressions and everything. And Mark Hamill's performance in this, I thought, was so refreshing compared to what Brad Dourif did. Not better than Brad Dourif, but just for this version of the story, I thought it worked so well, actually. Because I think in this story, having that version of Chucky would not have worked as well. And I think we were really going crazy, like if you think back to like Cult of Chucky, which I liked actually. I know a lot of people didn't like Cult of Chucky, but I actually enjoyed what Brad Dourif did with that character in that movie. You know, really Chucky himself saved that movie for me. But in this one, they had to go darker because it fit with the story. And, you know, Chucky was a major, major threat throughout this whole thing. And it was interesting that he could like control, you know, other objects around him. My dog is barking. But the last thing I want to talk about is that last act. You know, I already touched on the toy store, but really most of this last act, like Child's Play 2, takes place in the toy store. And Chucky like taking over some of the machines and whatnot. You had the Chucky Bears, which was a nice little added bonus to the movie. You know, they're just creepy, evil bears. What's not to love about that? But, you know, at the end of every Chucky movie, Chucky is like pretty much obliterated. And this is no different. You had this detective, Norris, that was helping out Karen. And they come together to defeat Chucky in the end. Because if Chucky would have won, he would have taken over those other dolls, and then it would have been complete chaos. But there's one scene at the end where I was actually walking with my wife today, and we were talking about the movie, and I was asking her, like, what'd you like, what you didn't like? And she mentioned the scene at the end where the kids are, like, beating him with the bat. And it was kind of like that scene in Office Space where they're beating the copy machine. Back up in your ass with the resurrection. And it was hilarious. And I like that it showed like how the kids like hated Chucky. But they, you know, especially Andy realizes, you know, what he created. The emotional toll that that's got to take on a kid, knowing that everything that's happened up to this point is kind of his fault, is pretty interesting. And they could actually play on that in the sequel. Maybe Andy is like doing everything he can to stop this organization of, you know, these Chucky dolls. Or just always having that paranoia in the back of his mind. And, you know, and I think that's one thing that they could focus on in the sequel if they do one, is paranoia. So anyway, guys, that is my spoiler review for Child's Play. Let me know in the comments one of your favorite moments in the movie. And also, if you didn't like the movie, let me know why you didn't like it in the comments. Let me know one aspect that you really hated about this movie. And I got a feeling a lot of people are going to say Chucky himself. Because this was not the Chucky from before. But I'm able to separate that from it. As long as it's a good movie, I always say a good movie is a good movie. So anyway, guys, I'm about to record my ranking for all the Chucky movies now. So look for that. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. And want to play?